Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Genesys is a tech company headquartered in California. The company is focused on contact center technology and offers a range of tools from complete cloud-based contact centers through to chatbots, voice bots, and AI systems to personalize the customer experience. Genesys is also truly global with operations in over 100 countries and over 11,000 customers. Merijn spent the last 4 years as the Chief Marketing Officer of Genesys, and last month he changed job. He's now Executive Vice President and General Manager for Employee Engagement. Now, I thought that it was a very interesting move to have a board-level executive focused on being a champion for employee engagement and how this can influence CX. So I called Merijn at his base in San Francisco to learn more. Okay, Merijn, thanks for being on the podcast. I mean, first, it would be great to hear a summary of the Genesys experience throughout the pandemic. I'm sure that you had to get most of your team operating in a work-from-home model. How was that experience for you guys?
Well, you're right. And we did it fairly early on, actually. Already on, I believe, the 9th of March, we went to full virtual mode. And it was kind of a double dipping situation because at the same time as we were trying to protect our employees and make sure that we create our own business continuity, we had customers that at the same time were struggling with a problem that we're trying to help as well. This is kind of interesting because we had employees that were helping customers move their location to work from home while they were helping customers to move their agent's location to work from home as well. I'm happy that we did that well. And when I look back, I think we operated fairly seamlessly. We already had a large population that was working from home at the time. And within a matter of days, we were 100% virtual, really. And I don't think we had a massive amount of hiccups in our business model. So we executed it well. And we're now and still are a mostly virtual company.
And it's interesting that because a lot of the analysts are now talking about resilience as one of the key words for moving forward now. I mean, especially because many executives are now worried about what happens if this goes on longer than expected or if there's another virus next year. So, I mean, are you going to embrace this kind of flexible working from home and perhaps working partially at the office? Moving forward, so you will have a more flexible work environment.
Yeah, as I said just before, we already had I think, significantly larger virtual workforce than many other companies that I know that I've seen. So that kind of mentally prepares you for having the tools in place and the operational processes in place and the understanding of a larger virtual workforce. And I don't think that when we go forward, we would fall back on a complete 100% office location-based environment. I want to be really careful not to be an amateur biologist or pandemic expert because I'm not. And I don't know how long this will take and what will happen. But I do know that wherever we land, a new normal will be defined. And we're kind of defining that as we speak. We're defining it together with our customers. We're also defining it internally. Where we are slowly opening some of our offices, but then with a lower amount of people that are in the office. We're kind of separating the way you do sales from being in an office and discussions like that. What do you really need to do in an office? And I think one of the things we learned throughout all this is that we can be very effective and very efficient and productive being in a virtual environment as well. I do think that a lot of people will like the touch base and the possibility every once in a while to share with colleagues in a different way than just in a virtual mode. So I think when you look at the future, I think there will be a new normal of a mixing environment between office and remote work, where I would argue that the relative percentage of remote work will increase. It's true for our customers. We see that quite a bit. It will be true for us as well from a future perspective. I also think that resiliency it's an interesting word, right? So we went into this pandemic, and initially, I would argue the first phase was a panic phase, where everybody was just running around like, how do we continue our business model and operate as we were intending and as we were before, which turned out to be really difficult for some and really easy for others. And the first thing we did after we make sure that our employees were safe is to go to those customers and offer our help. So what is it that you need to do and how can we help you? It could be commercial flexibility. That could be by helping you migrate your agents to work from home, whatever you wanted to do. And I'm happy that we first went to our customers and sat down, listened to them, and then helped them to move thousands of agents to work from home in somewhat seamless mode. So a lot of our customers that went through that will now realize, hey, this is not a hype or a myth. My agents actually can work from home. So what is the next model, the next business model, or even flexible work model that I'm going to adopt and move from panic phase where I'm just trying to help my customers to get to the new reality where I want to continue my business, start differentiating again, but maintain some of this flexibility and resiliency that I built into the process now. So it's an interesting time. Discussions are very different than they used to be. It's where people talked about cloud, for instance, as a security risk, and we're somewhat pushing back at least still big parts of our audience. That has changed quite a bit because everybody realizes that the ultimate flexibility of cloud will always be better suited for situations like this than a premise-based environment. So that's suddenly changed the discussions, and it's much more looking at how can I leverage this to move and create ultimate agility in my business model that allows me to onboard exponential technologies all the time while maintaining people and engaging with my employees to make them happy and proud of the work that they do.
So would you say then that, for your clients, this kind of blended model in terms of location of agents, but also the use of technologies such as cloud-based contact center, this more flexible, agile approach is basically the default now?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that some of the norms that were kind of ruling in our industry, where we talked about months of deployment, which in hindsight now turns out to be a lot of internal IT procrastination sometimes on projects and hardware purchases, are all out of the window. And if I look at how quickly we onboarded some of our customers onto the cloud, where they within 24 hours were running a contact center, which they never believed would be possible, that's the new norm. So next to the fact that agility, flexibility, a new form of resiliency, has also created a new form of SLA understanding of speed to market, of the ability to move on a dime and change direction very quickly. And I think those are all the new norms that are supported, by the way, by working from home in a better way, right? It creates more flexibility in your patterns and in your models that will allow our customers to look at what we do in customer experience in a very new light, which for me as an industry follower and a geek somewhat on customer experience, if you call me, I will pick up the phone because I'm just dying to talk to people and understand what they're doing, even if you're on a script. It's fascinating to see that paradigms that for the last 30 years were golden truth are disappearing and crumbling, finally, I would say, because I've been trying to crusade against them for some time. But that's happening, and I'm a very much a glass half full person, but that's the positive thing that comes out of a situation like this, where people are forced to make decisions. And when they then make decisions, they are sometimes more disruptive than they would have ever imagined.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly a lot of change happening very quickly. And what's very interesting is that most of your clients and your own company, you will have sent people home to work at home almost as an emergency. There was a crisis response. And so we see that there's quite a big difference between people that you hire specifically to work from home and those people who were just sent home as part of the pandemic response. How do you manage the needs of your colleagues? Because some of them may not have the space to work at home or a quiet environment to work at home. So, I know that your new role is around employee engagement. So how are you engaging with the team and trying to give them the best possible work environment that works for them?
Right. That's a good question. I think a lot of people underestimate the difference it makes between having a designed work from home environment and being hired for that and having been done that for 10 years. And suddenly, because of a situation you have no control over, being forced to work from home. And I think that those are not necessarily two groups, because the first group suddenly might have teenagers or kids running around the table as well that they were supposed to. But at least they have established routines. They know within their friends and maybe a family situation what's going to go down. where the ones that suddenly come home, and all of them come home, right? If they're not first responders, have a very different situation to manage. I myself at people, and I know contact center agents have the same experience, that are just challenged working from home. It's not easy if you have 4 kids in the age between 2 and 8 that are trying to run around the kitchen table while you only have 1 bedroom to work from, right? So the shame of the noise that you create, I think a lot of people have embraced that and are very open for kids in Zoom videos and stuff like that. But it's still hard. And those people are the ones that probably would raise their hand and say, listen, if I can get back to the office, I would be one of the first to like to go back to the office. And I think when I looked at my team and look at employee engagement in general, that's something that you need to cater for. You need to take that into account. It is kind of funny as well from an engagement perspective to see that initially when everybody went to Zoom or Microsoft Teams or WebEx or whatever tool you used, is that people started using that tool also as an interactive engagement capability. So we use Zoom. I'm on Zoom from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening. And then at 7 o'clock, I'm going to do a virtual drinking meet and greet on Zoom, which is actually weird because it's my workspace and suddenly I am drinking in my workplace. It feels awkward. And initially, I think people did it all the time. And there were a lot of pictures on LinkedIn and on Twitter around like team gatherings. You see that less and less because I think people now start separating Zoom from work into other ways to virtually engage on different platforms, over social media, unified communication capabilities. I would even argue now gamification too, right? So the ability to do virtual settings and virtual little events, including gamification, quizzing, surveys, and elements like that. So that's becoming a part and a kind of a standard in what we see from an engagement perspective today.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was going to ask you about some research by Fifth Talent that I read recently. And they asked over 4,000 customer service employees, would you like to stay at home or would you like to return to the office? And it was almost nobody wanted to stay at home 100% or go to the office 100%. It's almost everybody wants flexibility. Right. So, I mean, is that now going to be an important part of your own engagement strategy moving forward?
Yeah, it will be. I think the increased flexibility of work patterns and the increased possibilities with automation allow you to look at contact center agents and employees in a very different light. Right, where there was always a real-time pressure on having a certain amount of staff available to handle a number of queries. I have now many more toggling possibilities with automation, with other capabilities that are around me, instead of just human answers to certain questions. So that also gives me ultimate flexibility in my employees and the way they want to work and how they want to work. I think from a pandemic perspective, like cohort scheduling are elements that are very logical. But you're right. I think when you look at the future, I think people will want to come to the office for training, maybe meetings that they have with their team every once in a while, just for team gatherings and some engagement in a different way than remote. But are most of the time, contact center wise, working from home. And then doing that in very, very extreme split shift like scenarios where they work an hour in the morning, then they bring their kids to school, they work 2 hours, they have lunch, they work another hour, they bring their kids home from school, and in the evening they work another 4 hours, right? So yes, an 8-hour day, but then spread across a much longer period of time, which makes it interesting. And if you look at other channels like asynchronous channels, they are built for that. So I think that both will go hand in hand, and the kind of the promise of asynchronous that has not really happened yet in customer experience will finally be supported by schedules and flexibility that will allow that to happen as well. And enterprises will be less afraid of adopting those capabilities into their own arsenal and just opening up that possibility because they now can staff against it and be ultimately flexible. So I do think that the ability to work from home and go to the office will be part of scheduling, will be part of normal work routines. And I think it will actually be great because it will allow you to do and be where you really need to be at a certain time. What fits your life, what fits your model, right? So.
And it's interesting that you mentioned there that this type of more flexible work may well fit very well with asynchronous communications. Do you think that we will see asynchronous comms, I mean, support for tools like WhatsApp, for example, overtake the use of synchronous chat, having to sit there and wait for a chat agent to be available and to respond?
Yes, I do. Actually, I'm a little bit disappointed that it didn't already happen. In my own forecast I created in 2016, I was aiming for 2020 to be the year when that would overtake synchronous chat. I don't think that has happened yet, but it will be very close. And I think the ability to have agents available at any corner of the day and have a routing system in place that are completely fully integrated with your workforce optimization domain, allow you to toggle and based on schedule make decisions on priorities and almost continuously forecast on what's going on, will allow you to do exactly that. I think that a lot of the laggardness around asynchronous is still the business and the enterprise that is worried when they open their channel that it will just go completely ballistic, exponential growth, because it's so easy to communicate. I think the benefit is that you can just toggle, right? You get a message, I've got a minute, maybe 2 minutes. With chat, it's already, when you don't get an answer in a minute, you're disappointed. So chat is from synchronous becoming almost real time now, where asynchronous still has the ability to really manage it, get the right agent, the right query, the right question, even check whether you have like community capabilities out there that could answer some of these async questions at the same time, which I also think that will provoke a new way of, already talked about Uberizing contact center experts, right? Why not use those communities to be participants in those domains as well? So I think it will drive new behaviors, and I think it will allow us to adopt asynchronous as a much bigger channel going forward and bypass chat. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's some companies out there that have been always work from home and building customer service systems. I mean, cloud-based customer service. And I'm thinking about companies like 5CA in the Netherlands, Officium in California, Live Exchange in Canada, and they're basically building vast networks of agents that are connecting to a cloud-based platform. And those guys, they all argue that they're able to do work from home much better than the big traditional customer service companies that have moved everybody home because of the corporate culture. Like their culture is remote first rather than we can be remote friendly. I mean, and what do you think of it? I mean, you said that Genesys was already had a lot of people working at home anyway. So I guess that you already have a kind of remote first culture. But what do you see in the industry generally? I mean, how do you think that some of the larger players are managing to handle this in terms of, do they have the right culture to handle managing people at home?
No, it's a good question. We did have a significant portion of our population be remote, which means that when you build culture or you develop culture as a company, it's part of it already. It's kind of ingrained in your DNA that is the case. And when you bring people together for whatever reason, you make sure that's special and it's useful and it's quality time based on content or based on what you do together or based on the investment that you do and making sure that meetings and getting together are really valuable. So that's part of your culture. When that's not the case, and you have an office culture and you move from one office to the next, that quite often is actually not so important. It's not an element of surprise or curiosity or how do you work, right? It's more normal. And I would expect that companies that have a dominant office-based employee base will struggle more in creating a new culture. Will probably have struggled more in making sure that people kept engaged and informed and communicated to. Because I think a lot of the culture in a remote environment is based on the ability to communicate very clearly, very quickly, and be very transparent, I think, about what it is that is top of mind. And instead of filtering down messages or cascading a lot, I think there's a much flatter hierarchy of communication that happens within cultures that are remote versus cultures that are very office-based. I think that nobody, and I'm not talking about manufacturing and elements like that, but if you look at software, tech, and most of our customers in finance and telco and elements like that, will have the expectation that they will return back to their office-based environment, that they will return back to 1,000 agent contact center location somewhere in Minneapolis or Florida or wherever. I just don't think that they will expect that, and I think that they're all preparing to find a mixture of both. And while doing that and looking at what culture it is that they would like to have, how do you make people accountable? How do you manage people, right, that are remote? I think there are still a lot of especially contact center managers out there that manage on KPIs that are very, very linked to walking around management or sitting next to you management, which are all capabilities that fall away. The coffee machine conversation is really difficult to replicate. The whole way coaching, hey, maybe you should do that, really difficult to do in a remote environment. So to build it into a culture where you are able to slip those coaching elements in, you have to rely on technology, you have to rely on tools, but make those tools as human as possible and less intrusive in the way that you work with your employees. So some of them will struggle. I think they will have a hard time really getting to that next culture level. I think the good thing is that most of these companies have acquired quite a bit, like we did, which helps you because you constantly bring in new cultures. You have to form a new culture. You have to shape. So that will help them. But I think we have an advantage because we were already remote and in our DNA it fit well. And I think that will help us. It already helped us. So.
That's great. That's great. Okay, I mean, finally, I was really interested in your new role because, now you're heading up employee engagement. Because this is something that I often talk about. People ask me about customer experience strategy. And I always say that you can't deliver great customer experience if you don't have great employee experience. Right. You need people who are actually engaged and they're enjoying their tasks at work. They're not just watching the clock and waiting for their shift to finish. So, what are the kind of initiatives that you're going to be picking up once we get past this immediate crisis then?
So one of the things we're already picking up is exactly this engagement capability, right? I think there's enough stats that say happy employees make happy customers and your ROI is better with happy employees or engaged employees and customer satisfaction is higher. So I don't have to dwell on that anymore. But then the question becomes, okay, well, that's nice, but how do I then engage with these employees that I have? And how do I make sure that I empower them? And how do I make sure that the environment I've created around them is not just a hardcore KPI factory that's only focused on productivity? I strongly believe that next to efficiency, I think humanity and effect can go hand in hand in an environment that is focused on customer experience. And that's what we're focusing on, because we do think that the human element is an element that you always need to surprise and create experiences that are unmatched and unparalleled, especially when you need to. One of the things that I noticed when I listened to recordings in the early weeks of the pandemic is that people were picking up the phone because they needed certainty. Right? So they wanted to hear from a human, yes, your flight is canceled, or yes, your rebooking is done, or yes, this, or yes, that. Instead of having an email confirmation or a web chat confirmation, they wanted to hear from a human. So the trust they have in humans is much higher still than they have in enterprises or that they have in applications. The ability to use human qualities like empathy, build trust, and at the end of the day, that builds loyalty. And that's why I think that the approach that a lot of vendors that we see in the industry is, I'm just going to focus on the employees, is faulty. I think you need to focus on both at the same time. Because at the end of the day, I think the best experience ever happens when you match a uniquely known customer with a uniquely capable agent. If you get that match right and you have that agent do what he's there for, is to use empathy or create the ability to have a human interaction, I think that experience will always be better than when this agent that's super skilled in that is doing an address change or doing a billing with you, which is what a bot can do very well and probably even better than a human. So that blending, that capability is by creating WEM or WFO together with your engagement platform. So it should go hand in hand. It should be one data set. It should be one routing engine that's doing everything together with your WFO capability. That's what we're building. That's what we have already. And I do think that when you look at the foundation that we have, we got this next generation cloud platform. There's a disruption happening in our industry. And I think that we want to write that book because a lot of that will be sitting around workforce engagement. It will be sitting around the way that we look at matching, right? I don't know how well you know or well informed you are about our market, but a lot of people that work in contact centers still know Erlang C modules and calculations. That's what they still base some of their reality on, which for me is the same as walking into a contact center and hoping that everything will be fine, which is a really bad strategy. I think we haven't built enough power in our AI platform. We have built enough power in our accuracy models that we can continuously forecast and plan for you. So we could create a new engagement model at any given time, which is a blending of all your channels, a blending of all your automated capabilities, a blending of your community, a blending of your outsource, a blending of your agents. And what you really want to do is make those agents fit the customers that really need them. And that's the trick. And you can only do that if they go hand in hand. So I think that change and that paradigm shift is disruptive. It will take service level away. It will take queue-based routing away. It will take the entire concept of queue away. KPIs like average handling time don't mean anything anymore in the future. And I think that's the future I would like to be a part of. And this is the future I'm building. So that's what we're doing with my team.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm at Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.